This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, and it is football season, folks. The NFL is back this week. Major college football is coming back this week. High school football, the Friday Night Lights have been on for a couple of weeks, at least here in the state of Iowa so far. And you can smell the pigskin in the air. It is always a great time of the year. When the seasons turn from summer to fall, baseball gets into the pennant race, and football comes back. It's such a fun time, especially to be in the Midwest. And our Moonlighter for today is a Midwestern guy who is now in the NFL. His name is Reid Sinnett. Reid Sinnett, if you haven't heard that name, he grew up in Johnston, Iowa, where he did not become the starter at his high school football team until his senior year. Now, Reid Sinnett, he's a 6'4", 225-pound quarterback. So even though he didn't start behind center until his senior year, he still had a lot of college interest. And he went out to play in San Diego for San Diego in the FBS division. And even out at San Diego, he redshirted his first year, and then he sat behind Anthony Lawrence out in San Diego for 4 years, essentially as a backup. 1 as a redshirt, 3 more as a backup before getting the starting quarterback job as a fifth-year senior. And last year, Reid had an unbelievably great year at San Diego. As I said, it was his first year as a starter, and Reid had a really great senior year last year for the Toreros out in San Diego. He completed almost 67% of his passes, had 3,528 passing yards as a senior, 32 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, was a finalist for the Walter Payton Award, and all of a sudden, he was popping on a bunch of NFL radars last year. And earlier this spring, right after the draft, Reid Sinnett signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's right, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are currently coached by Bruce Arians, but even more importantly, have Tom Brady as the starting quarterback, Rob Gronkowski as the starting tight end. What a fun team to be on, and what a fun time for Reid Sinnett to be getting his first dose of the NFL life while sitting behind Tom Brady. And so it was great to get caught up with Reid Sinnett. I remember Reid, I used to coach baseball back at Johnston. You know, this is 6 or 7 years ago, and Reid was just a younger kid at that point. So I remember him, but I did not coach him at all. But Tom Griffin, of course, our resident middle school football coach here, Tom has been at Johnston for a long time, has coached Reid's brother, knew Reid really well throughout Reid's football career. And so for this interview, we actually got on a Zoom call with Reid while he was in his hotel down at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers training camp. This was a couple of weeks back. And so Tom, Reid, and I all jumped on this interview, and it was really fun to get caught up, not only to hear the excitement in Reid's voice as he prepares for his first NFL season, but also to reconnect Tom and Reid and myself and to talk about some of those things that we all have in common. And as just a bit of an update, since we did this interview, Reid he got released from the 53-man roster just the other day, but he was immediately signed to the practice squad. And if you've been following the NFL player waiver wire as of late, you'll know that Tampa Bay right now, they have, I think, 5 quarterbacks. They have Tom Brady as their starting quarterback. They also have Blaine Gabbert as their backup, Ryan Griffin, no relation to Tom, as their third stringer, and then Reid Sinnett on their practice squad. But Josh Rosen, the former first-round draft pick, was just released by the Miami Dolphins, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers also picked him up for the practice squad. So I believe Tampa Bay currently has 5 quarterbacks on their roster and practice squad, with Reid Sinnett being one of those. So it would be really fun to follow Reid's season this year and to follow his career. Being a quarterback in the NFL is a job that not many people have, and especially the chance to work with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. This is going to be a really fun interview. Enjoy football season and enjoy this episode of the Moonlight Graham Show. And if you like what we're doing here on the podcast, make sure to subscribe to the Moonlight Graham Show, and we would love it if you left us a 5-star review. You can also follow the show, of course, on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We love hearing from you guys each and every week. So enjoy today's episode with Moonlighter number 7 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Reid Sinnett.
But before we get to our episode, I want to talk to you about a new partner of ours. It's called the Underdog newsletter. So the Underdog newsletter is an email newsletter that you can sign up for online. Here's what it is. It's a bite-sized rundown of the best underdog stories in sports. You guys know we're all about the underdogs here on the Moonlight Graham Show. And what these guys do, they sift through thousands of stories each and every week and handpick the best underdog stories and deliver them into your email inbox each and every week. They deliver it the same time the Moonlight Graham Show comes out every Tuesday morning. And these guys over at the Underdog newsletter, they celebrate the long shots, the rejects, the misfits, beating the odds, and overcoming adversity. I don't know if there's a better email subscription list that you can sign up for than the Underdog newsletter. Here's how you find them. You head over to www.jokermag.com/newsletter, or to make it even easier, all you have to do is type in Underdog newsletter into Google, sign up for the Underdog newsletter. It'll come into your inbox every Tuesday morning, and let them know the Moonlight Graham Show sent you. I guarantee that you'll enjoy this Underdog newsletter each and every week. Check them out, guys.
Reid Sinnett, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Reid, you got a good Jude Law thing going with the hair right now, and you were just joking about Tom Brady is the local barber for the Buccaneers. So has Tom Brady given you a haircut, or will he give you a haircut?
I don't know. We'll have to see. It's been a conversation, and I told him I just need a couple, a little bit off the top. We'll see how that plays out. But Blaine Gabbert's one of the other quarterbacks, and his hair is longer than mine right now. And he said, I just need somebody to bring in the clippers so I can buzz it off. So we'll see how the haircut session goes.
How many quarterbacks do you guys have right now for Tampa Bay?
We have 4 total. It's Tom Brady, Blaine Gabbert, and Ryan Griffin, and myself.
Oh, Ryan Griffin, Tom's cousin.
Yeah, just for the record, I am not cheering for Ryan. I told him, I texted him, I said, "Sorry, buddy, you're out of the family for this cycle. I'm Team Reid."
I appreciate that. I think I'm sure you appreciated that as well.
Reid, we've heard so much through the years about Tom Brady's interactions with teammates. Like when a new guy comes on the team, he'll walk up to him and say, "Hi, I'm Tom. I play quarterback." He's this really humble guy. What was your first interaction with TB12?
Well, so we had some Zoom meetings and stuff, which is always weird because, people are kind of halfway paying attention, or they're in the call, but don't have their screen on, all those weird kind of dynamics. So I didn't really feel like I had met the guys until I was in person. And it was just we were in a meeting, I was sitting in there, and they all kind of walked in, and it just felt like it started. But, nothing crazy. And, they've all been really positive with me. I wish I had a better first interaction for you, but hi, I'm Reid. Nice to meet you guys. And, I'm Tom, I'm Blaine, I'm Ryan. It was pretty much that.
I've heard you say a couple of times that Tampa Bay was the spot that you wanted to go. You had some spots after the draft where, there were some teams inquiring about you. Why Tampa Bay? I mean,
for simple, it's Tom, and it was kind of the quarterback situation. So, getting to learn from him and be around this organization was a big plus for me. I had between 12 and 15 legit offers, and my agent called me that morning or that afternoon and was like, "Do you want to entertain any of these other ones?" And I was, kind of, "What do you think?" And he said, "I don't think there's any reason to consider anywhere else." So, and they guaranteed a good portion of my contract and stuff. So it was ideal from every standpoint. And so far, I mean, it's gone about as well as I could imagine, given everything that's going on.
Yeah. Has it been a lot different with COVID right now?
Well, what's funny is I don't know any different. So, Blaine's been in the league for 10 years, Ryan 8, and Tom 20. So them talking about how different everything is and stuff, I'm kind of sitting there I guess I don't know any differently. So normally there's rookie camp and OTAs and all that stuff all summer, and we just didn't have it. But, our locker room, all the rookies and the young guys are in the indoor facility. So we're not even in the same locker room. So, I got to walk to and from the main part of the facility to get to meetings and stuff like that. So, I think it's different in terms of camaraderie and, how much time I'm getting to see. Obviously we spend a lot of time with the quarterbacks, but I haven't seen hardly any of the defensive guys besides on the field. And I think that'll be kind of interesting moving forward.
So, Reid, you grew up, of course, a Johnston Dragon. Tom is his purple and gold on right now.
I did. I'm repping it right here.
Tom, you're one of the most legendary football coaches in Johnston history. What was the scouting report on Reid Sinnett as Reid was coming up the ranks at Johnston?
I think it's so funny too, and I mean this with all the love in the world, Reid. I think it's so funny, like, look at your stats and how much success you had running the ball, because I don't think that was part of the scouting report with you coming up. I don't think people were like, okay, this guy likes to get out of the pocket and go.
I don't think that was ever a strong suit of mine. Somehow it happened a little bit this year, but I think it's interesting how I progressed as an athlete, especially after college or after high school. And, I think in high school I felt like I had a strong arm. I was a bigger kid, but I never really developed into like being a grown up until I was probably 20 or 21. And I think that probably had a lot to do. And Tom will know the kid who ended up starting in front of me my junior year was just a more mature kid. And, I still look back on that and, I'm not real fond of how that went, but it kind of is what it is. And, my road wasn't necessarily a straight one, but I kind of got to where I wanted to go. But, that I remember in 8th grade, Tom, what year were you coaching? Did you coach 8th grade the same year I was in 8th grade?
I was just telling Tim, I think we flip-flopped. I was still a high school coach, and then I became the 8th grade head coach, and so I just missed you. I coached your brother, but I didn't get to coach you. But
so I won't name names, but the 8th grade head coach was not my biggest fan, and I remember he benched me at some point because one of the kids decided one day that he could throw, and so I didn't play. I didn't start anymore, and I told my parents that I didn't want to play anymore. And my mom was like, come on, man, like stick it out for one more year. I think you'll like it. And I loved football, and so it was kind of a bad experience that year. Mm-hmm. And then, 9th grade and sophomore year, I was with the varsity team back and forth. So, I was a freshman getting to suit up for varsity games, so I always felt like that was kind of a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And then, my junior year, my actual stat line, I was 6 for 6 and threw 4 touchdowns in that first start against Lincoln. And I didn't play for the next 2 weeks. And it was kind of one of those things where I had some people, telling me, the principal and people are like, we're excited to watch you keep playing. And then I didn't play. And it was a weird situation for me. And, I had no control over it. So I tried to be supportive and, be as good of a player as I could be. That was always something I never understood and I couldn't figure out. I still don't have an answer for you to this day. But, I think it was a lot different once I got to college.
It's interesting because so much of college recruiting happens so early now. Like if you have a big junior year in football or baseball, especially in Iowa, you're not going to show up on people's radars. Do you think that was kind of why you had to end up out at San Diego? And San Diego's had a great football program, but, like Iowa, Iowa State, UNI, there's tons of good schools in the Big 12 or Big 10 throughout the Midwest, and you ended up way out in San Diego.
Yeah, and I'm not bitter about it at all, clearly.
Right. Well, it worked out.
Yeah, it did work out. But I'm still a little jaded by it. And, I had recruiting letters coming from Ivy League schools that I didn't see until 6 months after the fact and stuff like that. North Dakota State came to recruit me, and the coach came, and I didn't even get to see him because our coach sent a couple other guys to go see him, and because he didn't think I was good to play there. And so I kind of had some little things like that, frustrated me. But it definitely changed, the dynamic of where I could have gone to play. I had baseball offers more than I had football offers. And I would say that I was a much better football player. But again, it was just kind of the way things worked out. And Ryan Boyle, who was a Gatorade Player of the Year like 3 times in a row, had all of the Iowa offers. There was a kid in Ames who ended up being a walk-on there in my class at Iowa State. So I didn't really feel like there was a lot of room for me in Iowa, which was fine. But to not have any, upside and I think if I had started and played more my junior year, it would have been different. But I don't know that there's a lot of 6'4", 220-pound high school kids that can actually throw and cared about what was going on in terms of scheme. Don't end up at a bigger school, but that's how it played out.
Yeah, and then you redshirt right away at San Diego. Mm-hmm. When you go in redshirt and then you don't start until your super senior year at San Diego, at that time, you had only started 1 year of high school football in like an 8-year period. Mm-hmm. So you're still pretty green as a quarterback. So what have you had to learn, being the backup or being on the bench or learning from other guys that are out there? How have you, learned from others, watching others?
Well, in San Diego, it was a lot of good and bad. And Anthony Lawrence, who was the kid in front of me, is one of my best friends. And we were very different players, very different emotionally in how we handled our teammates and the coaches. And so it was a lot of, I like how Anthony does this and I don't like how he does this. So it kind of always gave me, a good blueprint of how I wanted to be a leader when I became the starter. And I learned how to be a leader as the two and also push him in practice. And legitimately every camp, I went in thinking that I could win the job because if he was sitting right next to me, we could argue about who's better. But, I always thought that I was talented enough to be the guy, and we didn't lose. That was part of the problem was, if we had a 4-5 season, then there would be no reason to keep the starter. But, when we're going 9-2 and beating teams in playoff games, there's not as much of an inclination to make a change. So I felt like I tried to learn, how to be prepared to be the starter. That was always my thing was even as a freshman, I wanted to be prepared. So if I get thrown in there, I know what's going on. And I think that'll be a good thing, moving forward. If I'm on the practice squad or the active roster or whatever, that I can prepare like I'm going to be the starter and get out there on a Sunday. And if something happens and I'm on the field, then I actually know what's going on. And, that nervousness, I think, kind of dissipates if you're prepared.
Tim asked me what the scouting report on you would have been. And, obviously I'm teasing you about your ability to run, which you did have a lot of success with that in college. But I would definitely say the two things that stick out were you are a very smart kid. I think as a young man, that was easily part of your reputation was people like you. I mean, you're a good person too, but you're a very smart kid. So I think being prepared and being like understanding scheme, being a very heady guy, that's definitely would be part of the scouting report. And I think you always threw a very accurate ball. Like I think you were a good passer, a very good pure passer. So, I mean, obviously, Tom Brady is the GOAT, right? Like, I mean, I'm a Packers fan. I love Aaron Rodgers, but Tom Brady is obviously I'm not comparing you to Tom Brady, but I think you're in that kind of mold of like, you're a smart quarterback, you throw a good ball. I think that's an amazing guy for you to learn from. And so I think also that translated with you played first base in baseball. And I just think some of that, leadership, understanding the game, being aware, and obviously throwing the ball when you have to, but as a first baseman. But as you've kind of transitioned, learning from Anthony and playing with him and learning how to compete, what did you take away from his ability as, a different style of quarterback, a more mobile quarterback that you've kind of incorporated into yourself?
I think a lot of it wasn't necessarily what he did on the field. He was really good with his timing. And so that was something that, he didn't have a great arm. He didn't have great arm talent, but he was always on time. And that was something that even now, you have to be anticipatory on throws and you can't wait for somebody to like make eye contact with you to throw a football because it gets the window's gone. And so that was something that, I'm still trying to get better at. And it's hard, as the level of play increases. But I think Anthony did a really good job of finding a way to get the most out of himself that he possibly could. He was 6 foot, maybe 200 pounds and was not, a super lean and athletic guy, but he got every ounce of his talent out of himself. And so he pushed himself with what he ate. He was focused on how he could sleep better and things like that. So really focusing on how I could become, a better version of myself with doing these little things off the field have still made a big impact on my day-to-day routine and things like that. And I think that was honestly the biggest thing that I took from him was, there's another level that you can go to and there's always ways that you can keep pushing yourself. And it doesn't have to be, physically and, your effort in the weight room. It can be, what are you putting in your body immediately after you're in the weight room? And what are you doing when you're, at home by yourself and stuff like that? Can you stretch a little bit? Can you go to bed 30 minutes earlier? Stuff like that. And it was, it didn't hit me until I was a senior in college. And, and then that 5th year, it was all I did was eat, sleep, and, breathe football, which was awesome. But it's kind of how, I think I got to where I am.
What was the moment at San Diego where you knew that, hey, football might be something in the cards for me even after San Diego?
I'll tell you what. So Coach Lindsay is 74 now, and he has been around a lot of football. He played in the NFL, coached in the NFL for a long time, and I think he loves being in San Diego. So I think this is a perfect program for him. But when I was a true freshman, he said he didn't say a lot of positive things to anybody, but he told me, before winter break, he's like, I think you were the biggest shock we had in training camp. And, I think if you focus with this, you could keep playing football. And I was like, well, I'm a freshman and I'm not playing. I didn't play at all this year. So, whatever. And I remember telling a couple of my buddies that he said that, and they kind of, didn't laugh at me, but they're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, you're in San Diego, whatever. And so I don't know. It was something that he said to me that always kind of made me feel that I, had the size and the mental capacity to do it. And then, this last year, Jacques Cesaire was our defensive line coach, who was an all-pro guy, played for the Chargers for a long time. And he's like, you can do this. Just, focus on it, take care of your body, and, don't get too hung up on, scouts at practice and this and that. Just, be you and you'll be fine. And he was a huge, proponent of me from the start. And those two had a big, impact on my confidence. And I think that's one of those things that if you give somebody a little bit of confidence and they play well for a couple games, they can get rolling.
Your first 4 pictures on the San Diego website, you look like a smiling little kid. And your picture, you're not smiling. It's like a blue steel look right into the camera. You really got the flow going. You got the beard going. Like it's like an adult act. It's like a Hollywood shot. What was the deal with that senior pick?
I'll tell you what. So usually like that first day is all meetings and compliance stuff. You got to go get a physical and all this stuff. So I'd been there all summer, and so we had done a bunch of that stuff. And our head coach for the first time had been like, you have to go in this time slot to do this stuff. So normally I would go check in at 8 o'clock, 2 hours before everybody else was there. I'd get moved in the dorm room, and then, we'd mess around or go have lunch, whatever. So we had these specific time slots we had to go in, and the freshmen got to take their pictures before us. So I'm sitting there just wasting, killing time. And one of them, I don't remember what somebody said, but they mouthed off to one of the older guys, and I was kind of like just pissed about it. And so that picture, I'm like consciously, I tried to smile at one point, and I just looked so ridiculous. I was like, can we take another one? And that's what it turned out to be.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, Reid, take us back to like the draft, right? You have this really great senior year where you don't play much your first 4 years. Your senior year, you have this great year. And, you probably exceeded everybody's expectations, maybe even your own. Then the draft happens, and you went to the Senior Bowl. Everything does really well. COVID happens, and it's all weird what's going on. Like, where were you at mentally for when the draft came around?
Well, so I had been training since January, and so I had that All-Star game, which went really well, and I felt like I was in a good spot. My agent was doing a really good job of, keeping me, up to speed with what was going on. And I had a lot of Zoom calls like this where we would go over scheme and talk with coaches and stuff like that, which was another exciting aspect of it. But it was weird. And just like kind of that feeling of, I thought, I might get drafted. And that was kind of the conversation with some coaches. And
yeah, is that what you were hearing? Like, late 4th, 5th, 6th round, something like that?
It was, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then, undrafted free agent or priority free agent. Like I was going to get a call like that. And so I was confident in that. And then, going into that last week, I had 4 or 5 teams that I really considered. And, we were talking about, what was going to happen. And so I had eyes on, certain guys during the draft, and I'm seeing certain guys go off the board or certain guys hanging on late. And I was, a mess, a wreck. I played golf with my family, and it did not take long enough. I got home, and I was like sitting on the couch watching the 6th round, and I was like, I can't do this. It seems like it's dragging on. So I remember sitting out and playing basketball in my backyard, just like, I need to do something. And, my agent called me, and he goes, Tampa Bay is not going to take a quarterback in the 6th or 7th, so just hang tight. And I was like, am I even going to be on a team? Like, what's going to happen here? Like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm still getting calls from coaches and stuff, so I kind of knew that, things were happening, but I was still kind of freaking out. And then he called me back and was like, here's the offer from Tampa. Do you want to do anything? And I was like, no, this is perfect. So it was quite a roller coaster of emotions. I don't want to relive it at all. Like that day afterwards was fantastic, but before it, I hated it. It was awful. So I couldn't imagine being, a first round or second round guy and having to wait an entire another day for it. But it was an emotional roller coaster for sure.
I feel like I read something after that your Senior Bowl, that All-Star game you played in, and it was like Reid Sinnett is a guy to watch out of this practice, and it was talking about the workouts during the week. And so maybe that's a credit to your preparation and that kind of stuff and your understanding of scheme. So I was kind of pumped up for you. And then it said, I want to pull it up so I could tell you who wrote it, but it said something that gave you like a 5th round grade. And I remember like reading that, and I just like looked at my wife and I'm like, Reid could get drafted. You know what I mean? It was just such a crazy thing. Yeah. And obviously as like a hometown fan kind of thing now, just knowing you as a person, like that was just cool for me. So I was super excited for you. And then when you got drafted, I think I DM'd you or something. When I saw the announcement, maybe that day or the next day. But I just think it was so exciting to be around. I can't imagine going through it. So what's the next step once you sign that contract? Did they give you a timeline, or with COVID, was it like, okay, we signed you, now stay home?
With COVID, it was awful because it was like I was home for the draft and I didn't want to be home, really much longer than that, and not, for any reason just besides I wanted to be in Tampa. And so it was like, the draft June 1st, you'll be here. Like June 1st, the team will pay for you to come down. We'll put you in a hotel, whatever it takes for you to be down here. The end of May rolls around and they're like, June 1st isn't going to happen. Things are getting worse. Florida sucks. Like this isn't good. They say June 15th, sit tight for 2 more weeks. So they're sending me workouts and stuff, which is good. So I'm not, sitting on my butt or anything. But then June 15th rolls around and they're like, I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe after the 4th, I think it could be early July. Early July happens and it just gets pushed back again. And it ended up being like the 26th or 27th. But we're on an NFLPA call Sunday and I'm supposed to be in Tampa on a flight on Tuesday. And we still don't have details because they're not sure what the NFLPA is going to do, what the owners are going to do. So I'm on this call looking at my parents like, I don't know if there's going to be football. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
And so they ended up telling us that the agreement happened and we could be in the facility on whatever day. But it was, I went from, being so excited and having, feeling like I was going to get, paid right away and I was going to go down there. And then it felt like the entire summer I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And it just, it didn't feel like it was going to end.
For these drills that you're doing, I've seen a bunch of videos like on social media of, Tom Brady. Of course, they're all of Tom Brady.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at is like, can I see Reid Sinnett in the background? Like, where's Blaine Grabber? Where's Reid at? And, you're doing these quarterback drills. And in the 30-second clips on Twitter, they look like just any other quarterback drill. So is the drills that you're doing with Tom Brady and with Bruce Arians and Christensen down in Tampa Bay, are these similar to the same drills that you were doing in high school and in college and growing up? Or are you learning like even new drills now that you're in the NFL?
A lot of them are different, things that I haven't been taught. And, it's not a disservice to the coaches at USD. We didn't talk a lot of technique. It was a lot of scheme and how we were going to game plan for things. And so for us, I didn't get a lot of coaching on my technique. And a lot of the times it was, that was a bad throw, kind of figure it out. And it wasn't, again, it was, we didn't have time to meet and talk about that stuff. And so now, having talks about, getting your body to the reception area and where's the core of your body going. And I'm like, okay, that's why, I'm a lot more accurate right now, or the ball has a little bit more zip. And, finding that consistency, I think, is also exciting for me because, in college, I felt like this last year I had a lot of, solid games, and still there's throws that I'm like, how do you miss this? And now, watching these guys throw and watching how efficient Tom is with his body, I'm learning how to do these things and be more consistent. And I think it's just going to, continue to be, an improvement for me on a day-to-day basis.
Are you just like waiting for the moment where Brady makes a mistake and you're like, hey, Tom, your left elbow kind of sagged. You want to keep that up? Just something like.
I will not be correcting any of those guys in that technique. I will keep my mouth shut that entire time.
That's probably a good idea.
It was funny. So we ran a screen the other day and Tom missed the throw, and Ryan kind of grabbed me. He goes, just so you know, if you make that throw the exact same way, you will get screamed at. It's okay. That's just how it goes. Like, it's okay. And so it's kind of funny, the prefacing of, it's different when you're a 20-year vet versus being a rookie. You're going to coach differently. Yeah.
What's it like throwing to Gronk and Mike Evans? And so, these guys are like the biggest targets in the world. Like, your targets at Johnston High School are guys like me. They're like 5'10" white kids that, run 4.8 40s. And you got Gronk and, these guys, their catch radius is just massive. Mm-hmm. What's it like being a quarterback for these guys?
Well, one of the first days that we were throwing, I'm dropping back and we just kind of were rotating. It wasn't even like Tom was just throwing to Chris Evans and that was it, or Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. It wasn't, we were kind of all rotating together. And I throw like a post to Gronk and I kind of ripped it in there, and Tom goes, Reid Sinnett, University of San Diego, throwing to Rob Gronkowski. Who would have thought? And was like kind of giving me a hard time the rest of the day about that. So it was kind of a, it's so amazing just seeing the speed on these guys and stuff like that. And, even in college, Michael Bandy was one of the best receivers I've played with. And, I couldn't, get to the top of a play action and throw it as far as I can. And there's a couple of these guys on this team that if they don't get touched to the line of scrimmage, you can throw it as far as you can and they will get it. So that's kind of a fun, just as a quarterback, getting to drop back and throw it as far as you can is always fun.
Did your dad played hoops at KU, right?
Yeah, he did.
So did you grow up with just your dad like all the time telling you how great he was by playing at KU? Like, was it that type of household?
No, he's told some stories for sure, but he's willing to admit that he was the white dude at the end of the bench, and he wasn't doing anything crazy. But it's funny that I remember being like a sophomore, junior in high school, and I'd heard all of the stories, and we had new teammates or friends coming over, and I'm like, I don't want to hear this again. Like, I get it, we get it, and it became a thing. My buddies would give me a hard time in college that, it was something that just came up a lot of times. So like people would ask, are you an Iowa fan? Are you an Iowa State fan? I'd be like, no, both my parents went to KU, and my dad played basketball there, so we're big basketball fans. And they're always like, oh, my dad went to KU. So that was kind of something that I get a hard time about. And now they give him a hard time, which is even funnier.
Well, now you've surpassed him, right? Now you.
I guess so. Yeah.
You better have better stories than your dad does.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully, I get 10 years of good stories, and then we can do that. But Coach Christensen coached Peyton Manning in Indianapolis with Tom Moore, who's one of our head assistants, and the three of them, are telling stories about playing each other in games, and Coach Christensen, telling Tom how much he hates him for what happened in 2005, I think is so awesome. And, getting to hear these stories from these guys who have been around the game for so long is amazing.
So, Reid, you mentioned earlier you're a pretty good baseball player. Describe your best baseball moment.
My best baseball moment. We went to state my junior year, I think, and we were down like 7-1 in the top of the 7th inning against Urbandale, who's our big crosstown rival, and Sergio Alanis. Do you remember Sergio?
Oh yeah.
He takes a.
He always wore the flat bill hat. Sergio always would do the flat bill.
Yep, always, and he leans over the plate, takes a pitch on the elbow. Next guy up, Logan Ryan, takes a pitch on the elbow, and I hit a ball up the middle and ended up scoring both of them. And it was kind of on. It was like, all right, we're going, and the lights went out in the bottom of the 7th, and the sprinklers came on, and all this weird stuff that only happens in an Iowa rivalry game. And we ended up winning and going to the state, and we beat Waukee in the first round, who was the number 1 team in the state. So that's probably got to be my favorite, baseball memory.
Coach Barta, of course, is the legendary baseball coach at Johnson.
Yep.
Maybe the most intense baseball coach I've ever been around. Where does his intensity rank of all the coaches you've had?
He's got to be up there. I mean, he also is probably number 1 in terms of how much he loves his job and the game he's coaching. And I can't say enough good things about him. And it's funny, I went to practice with him, and because Logan Ryan's coaching with them now. And so I went with Logan, and we played catch, and I was kind of around the team. And I'm giving Steffes a hard time, like, this would not have happened when I was here. Like, we would have been yelled at and, taking balls off the chest, and we had hit by pitch drills, so everybody's standing there throwing tennis balls as hard as they can at each other. And it's like, these kids anymore, we can't treat them like that. So even 5 years removed, he's joking about, how different he's coaching. But that clubhouse and stuff they've got in there is pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's incredible. Tom, you guys got all the facilities there in Johnston.
It's the Johnston way, and see, now we can say home of Reid Sinnett, and so that's just going to help a little bit. So
I don't think that's pulling any weight anytime.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll try it anyways. Whatever. We're just firing up the 8th grade season, and so we have camp starting tomorrow night. It's like we've got to be the only middle school team in Iowa that hosts camp on a turf field, like a high school stadium. Like, yep. Oh my God, it's going to be ridiculous. But it doesn't. Now that we have the baseball and softball complex there, it kind of pales in comparison. We almost need a facelift.
Yeah, I mean, and that stadium that I wasn't allowed to use and had to hop the fence to get on,
yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They say we're going to play a middle school game on that turf, and I'm like, I think we're good at our stadium, because if we go there and we have our 42 fans that show up in a 6,000 or 7,000 person stadium, it might look a little too pitiful.
It's going to feel empty for sure.
The way we end every episode of the Moonlight Graham Show is with the 5 big questions. Of course, you know this because you're a big fan of the show. But the first question is, who is your all-time favorite teammate, Reid?
My all-time favorite teammate is Michael Bandy from the University of San Diego.
Was he that wide receiver?
Yep. So he and I were physically roommates this year. We shared a room in San Diego. And he is like one of the best competitors I've ever seen. He's one of my favorite people to be around, and I think he had a lot to do with, my success and how I've ended up here. And, he was a huge prospect, FCS prospect this last year, and so he was the only reason we had scouts at practice. And, without him, pushing me in the weight room and stuff, I don't think I'd be in the spot I am.
Where's he at now?
He's trying to find an NFL contract, but he's a 5'8" white kid that's didn't get a pro day, so it's hard for him. But I'm hoping that he ends up in a camp, and I think he's the kind of guy that he'll make it, or he'll be on in a camp, and he'll work so hard and be in the right spot all the time because he knows what's going on, and he'll stick.
What I love about the time of COVID right now, there's a lot of turmoil going around, but the silver lining in this is you see a lot of guys opting out. Like I saw a couple of teams had 2 wide receivers opt out today, and that it gives an opportunity to a guy like Michael Bandy, these underdog guys that are willing to stick their neck out there for any sort of opportunity. And so we're going to see some great storylines from these underdog guys that show up on an NFL roster this year, and it's going to make the football season really fun.
I agree 100%. And we're already down to 80 guys, and so we only have to cut like 10 or 11 people, I think, to get down to the total roster and practice squad. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how some of that stuff plays out.
Reid, what is the toughest part about being a quarterback?
I think it's, making sure that everybody's, on the same page with what their job is. And, today in a walkthrough, I'm break the huddle. I feel like I'm confident in the play. I know what's going on. And then one of the guys lines up wrong and looks at me and goes, "What do I have?" And I'm like, my brain exploded because I was like, well, that guy's in the right spot. Wait, where are you supposed to go? And then I kind of got discombobulated. And then, that's the hardest thing now is learning, where I can sit and look at the script and go, okay, I know where everybody is. I know what's going on. But operationally, when you get there and somebody's messed up, you're like, what is going on? So I think that's the hardest part, especially with young guys.
And you guys are, I think Bruce Arians, he's a West Coast guy, right? And you guys ran a lot of the West Coast in college?
We did in college. We ran West Coast, but I wouldn't say it's as much West Coast as what was in San Diego. It's not, 2 and 3 jet and 300 jet protection stuff. It's a little bit different. But it's wordy for sure.
Give us a play call.
What did I have today? I had like deuce right squeeze, Z peel, 25 blunt alert, 26 razor.
That's what we're running tomorrow night at camp.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you have the run check where I have to know 6 runs and make sure that everybody, based on the defense, I have to be able to call the right run and then, get yelled at if I don't get it right?
See, we only do 3 run checks.
Yeah, okay.
Right, left, and center.
Yeah.
Reid, we mentioned Michael Barta earlier, and we've mentioned Bruce Arians and Christensen a couple of times. We mentioned your San Diego coach. But what coach throughout your entire career has had the biggest impact on you?
It's definitely been Barta, and he was a big believer in me early on, and we had off periods in high school, and so I literally had a work study with him all the time, and we'd sit and BS about baseball or whatever, and he's been a big influence on me overall, and is one of my favorite people on the planet. We talk consistently, but in college, Tanner Engstrand was my first offense coordinator and the QB coach when I got there, and he's had a huge impact on how I've become as a player, and he's definitely one of my favorite people as well.
Reid, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a UNI grad.
Okay.
And I saw the last game of your college career was against the vaunted Panthers.
Yep.
I don't know if it's this game or what, but is there one game or one throw throughout your career that nags at you still to this day, keeps you up at night?
That UNI game does a little bit. First third down. First of all, we came out, they had played this weird 3-3-5 kind of defense that we hadn't seen all year in every game except for North Dakota State. So we're like, we kind of got a game plan what they're going to do. We expect them to do this. They come out on the first play, and they're in like a 4-2 normal over, and I was like, we did not game plan this. This is going to be interesting. And, the first play, you were good. The first pick six I threw, the play before we get an encroachment, but it should have just been a free play, and we had a wide-us open guy over the middle. And then the next play, they come in and look. I've seen, I look at it, I'm like, this guy comes every time. Drop back, and I've already thrown the ball, and he's in the lane, and I was like, yeah, that wasn't good. So that's a game that I definitely want back. And UNI is a really, really good football team. And, I think if we had, gotten ahead in that game early, we might have been able to play JMU in that third round.
What happens? So you game plan for a 3-3 all week, and then they show up in a 4-2. What do you do? Like, do you just try to, throw the game plan out the window at that point and start, going deeper into the playbook? Or what's an offensive coordinator or quarterback do when that's the case?
Well, for us, a lot of it was that we had answers for those things. It just wasn't exactly perfect. We have runs in the game plan that will work against the 4-2 and stuff, but it's not necessarily what we wanted, or we have certain angles and personnels to attack certain things. And so you definitely don't throw it out the window. And, we were smart enough offensively to make adjustments and say, well, instead of, running this bob, we're going to run something else. And we could have done that on the fly, and we did a little bit, but they were so athletic and so good up front that, I think it was hard for us to protect. And when they did protect, I didn't make the throw, or we didn't get open. And so we never got in a groove. And a lot of that has to do with quarterback play, but there's a couple plays in that game specifically that if, I look the other way, or, I don't throw that pick six on that first drive, I think we're legitimately in that game. So
sorry to bring it up. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It was definitely a learning experience, and it's hard to lose. And I don't know that I had played in a game like that where I had started where, it felt almost not hopeless, but I just was like, we can't get going, and it's hard. And, I'm sure that the NFL is going to be a lot like that. There's a lot of 17-10 games where, one big play is essentially the shift in the entire momentum.
Well, let's flip it then. What's the best moment? What's the best throw you've had?
Well, honestly, in high school, I had against Ankeny. I don't remember if you remember this, Tom, but threw a wheel to Andrew Hoyce to almost the time expires against Ankeny, and it was we had a sprint out the play before that I kind of dropped in a bucket to him, and he made a nice play, and then I think it was a couple plays later that we ended up scoring on that. And you can see, on the film, I remember seeing Andrew catch it, and then like the whole stands erupted, so like the camera got jumbled around and stuff. So that was a pretty exhilarating feeling. But winning championships in college, I don't think really compares to that. And that's not one game or one moment, but that feeling's pretty sweet.
What's the best advice you've ever received, Reid?
There's always the be confident in yourself, but also I learned early in my freshman year that sometimes it's best to just sit and be quiet, even if you're right, especially in a meeting room. And now that's translating well to the NFL. I'm getting coached on things, or behind us sometimes somebody's yelling about you should be in this, even though that you're correct, and then after the fact they're like, my bad, I didn't realize we were doing this and this. So sometimes it's better to just keep your mouth shut and, take the coaching, or, listen to what's going on rather than, feel to defend yourself. And that's something that I definitely took a little bit of time to learn.
I noticed on your stats you had 4 punts your senior year.
Yeah.
Was this like a talent you had that the coaches found out, or was it just like do a Ben Roethlisberger and pooch punt it? So
I was a punt, pass, and kick champion as a child.
Oh.
That was my thing, was punt, pass, and kick. That was what my dad and I did. So I had always kind of messed around with the specialists when we would go down to practice. So, we're supposed to be doing CQ exchange, and I'm kicking field goals and punting and stuff. So I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, they made me the backup punter. So I would go over and have a few kicks, or we would have a rugby, punting, or we had a fake a couple times where I would go as the punter, and maybe we would punt it, or maybe we would throw it. And so that was always something that I enjoyed doing. And this last year I was like, we need to pooch punt in some of these situations where we'll go with a kill. And, if it's not the look we want, then I'll punt it. And we did it a bunch. And I think, I had 2 or 3 inside the 10. So I think it was a pretty efficient thing. But my favorite thing before pregame was, I was not intense at all. I'm playing music. And then once everybody went up to the locker room, I just stayed out on the field because I didn't, the intensity wasn't my thing. So I'd sit down there and I'd just kick field goals, and I'd tell our head coach, Coach, I just made it from 42. If we get in a pinch, I got it. And he's kind of giving me a hard time the whole, while we're out there. But, I think that was one of my favorite, things pregame, was to kick field goals and punt.
Before we wrap it up, we're going through a lot of your ex-coaches here, but I do want to ask what you learned from Gabe Schultz. Schultz, one of the, legendary high school coach in his own right.
Yeah, I remember very vividly having a workout after practice where it was like we were each going to run a 400, do like 100 jump squats and 200 push-ups and then something else, and then we were going to run another 400. And I remember just being miserably sore the next day at practice, and he's, limber as can be, taking ground balls and throw. I'm like, what is wrong with this dude? Like, how are we doing this? Like, how is he still so energetic over this? But that was an interesting year for the sophomore baseball team.
Well, Gabe's a legend. Gabe's a legend in his own right. He's a physical freak. He is. He's right in that Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady.
No, I think the one thing I want to say is just it's really fun to watch you and cheer for you. Like I said, I'm a Packer fan, but I guess we could get a Buccaneers number 7 jersey, and I'd be all right with that. So I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. I think you can do great things, man. I'm cheering for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, Reid, thanks so much for taking some time today and joining us on the Moonlight Graham Show. And like Tom said, good luck. We'll all be cheering for you and rooting for you here. We're cheering for the underdogs, and I own a TB12 book, so not only before I joined the Buccaneers, I was already on the Buccaneers bandwagon, so I can't wait, man.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
Hey guys, thanks once again to listening to today's episode of the Moonlight Graham Show. And even though I do most of the interviews here on the podcast, there is a ton of work that happens behind the scenes that you guys don't see that make each episode possible. So I got to give a shout out to the Moonlight Graham Show team. First of all, Brian Sandvig, our producer. Brian does all of the post-production work, and in real life, he's not just a podcast producer, he's also a real estate agent. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home down in the Kansas or Missouri areas, give Brian Sandvig a call. Next guy on that list is Brendan Gargano. Brendan does all of our design and artwork here on the podcast. He's one of the most talented artists I've ever met, and I love all of his work. If you need any help on the design side with logos or anything like that, give Brendan Gargano a call. The next guy on that list is Andy Flattery, my older brother. Andy, of course, has done some of the interviews here on the podcast. He also is a certified financial planner. He owns a business called Simple Wealth Planning. If you need any help in that area, check Andy Flattery out. And then, of course, the trusty co-host Tom Griffin and my younger brother Neil Flattery. Those guys are just busy being husbands, being fathers, they're family men, but also they do a ton of work here on the show. So thanks again for listening. We really appreciate you guys subscribing and supporting the Moonlight Graham Show.